Hello, welcome to Mod Midwives, a Metro Midwifery podcast. I'm Gina Gerbach.
And I'm Nedra Hale, and we are home birth midwives serving the Denver metro area.
Well, it's been a very frustrating 30 minutes as we have tried to get the podcast up and running for today.
Yeah, we were going to try to do it the old-fashioned way with all the fancy equipment, but it didn't work out. So here we are on Zoom again.
Back to Zoom. I decided to bring all the podcast equipment to my house, and we were going to do it on the back porch. And now,
which is where I am.
Which is where Nedra is, and now I'm in the house so that we can't hear each other, and there's no echo. So, very frustrating. Well, so I guess it's good that we have video today, because today we're going to talk about what to expect in the first 3 days with the baby. So this is kind of a follow-up to Your Vagina Looks Scary to Me. So,
okay,
I don't know what we
great.
could call this one. Your scrotum looks scary to me. Not all babies have a scrotum. However,
this is true.
The scrotums do sometimes look odd, and has recently been commented on. So
yeah, and it's like, I mean, like, it's happened so many times that one of the grandparents exclaims about how large the scrotum is.
Yes.
My mom did that too when my first son was born. Yeah, she's like,
happened?
oh my gosh. People.
Okay.
People.
So we won't call it Your Scrotum Looks Scary to Me, because we have different types of babies. So, however, it's a follow-up. It's a corollary. Mm-hmm. So this is mostly like what to expect with your baby in the first 3 days. The first, as you're kind of getting your feet under you, 3 to 5 days, but generally the first 3 days. So what's something that really stands out to you as noteworthy in the first 3 days?
So is this baby specific, or this can be everything? It is baby specific?
Baby specific, yeah. Or what to expect about the baby.
Okay, so I think it's really interesting, and this did happen to me with my first baby, that they can get bloody discharge from their genitals. And I was not told that, and it totally freaked me out. And really, if I forget to tell people that, they always freak out about it because it's weird.
Yeah, so babies come out kind of looking not quite proportional and right, and one of the things is that the genitals, whether the scrotum or the vulva, could be quite swollen. And they can, especially babies with vulvas, can have a little bit of a discharge to it. Sometimes it's just yellow or white or clear, but sometimes there is a little blood to it, so it's like a little baby period. Did that just happen with one of your two?
No, it's been a little while, but it does happen, and the penises can have little brick dusty discharge, and so can be a little bit unexpected.
Yeah, that brick dust is uric acid crystals. And while later it's a sign that the baby could be dehydrated, early on it's really just kind of a clearing out of the pipes kind of thing. Yeah. Their head, let's talk about their head shape.
Well, their head is enormous, first of all, in proportion to their bodies. Yeah. So there's that. And then, of course, their heads are all different shapes after the birth, because there's all the molding from coming through the birth canal. So sometimes they look like this. See, it's good.
This is why it's good. It's video. Yeah.
It can go off to the side.
If they're posterior, it can be kind of straight up.
Yeah, it can be straight up. Yeah, and that can be alarming to people sometimes, but it is very normal.
Yeah. And it's really directly proportionate to the amount of time the baby spent in the birth canal. So the longer the pushing stage, the more molding you can expect. If your baby was born by cesarean section without much pushing, or without pushing past 0 station, then you wouldn't expect to see a lot of molding. However, as a doula, I once had a client who had a breech baby, and she had a bicornuate uterus, which is the 2 lobes of the uterus. And his little head was just wedged into one of the lobes, and he came out with a really molded head as a breech baby.
I saw one that had a little bit of molding from ribs too.
Oh yeah, interesting. Yeah.
It's so, because they joked about having that they almost had to put a vacuum on his little bum to get him out of the ribs.
Unwedged out of there. Wow, that's awesome. Yeah. Yeah. Another thing that you can expect is that, well, actually, let's talk about the vacuum. Occasionally, babies do need some help on the way out, either by forceps or vacuum, and that can create some different things too.
Mm.
So
Yes.
vacuum, a baby that's a vacuum it's just a suction cup that gets applied to the. I'm putting the wrong part on the head. It gets applied to the back of the head and provides some suction to help traction the baby out a little bit, and they can have a bruise or a some kind of mark from that. And then of course forceps are these blades that slide in next to the baby's face, and they can have marks from that as well. So that's something that could happen.
Definitely.
If a baby is breech, you can also expect that their legs might be, depending on how long they've been breech, their little legs can kind of be up and not go down. Yeah. That's so something funny. Yeah. It's very, you just kind of think that can't be comfortable, but that's how they've been for a long time. And
it's
so comfortable to
just
them.
Like, pring.
Yeah, exactly.
And then you're trying to like put them down. No.
Boing. Babies are in general very boingy. So like if you pick up their arm, they'll recoil down. If you move their arm over, they usually have a lot of flexion, and
it's something that we actually do as part of our tests, when we're doing that initial newborn exam about an hour after birth, is see how their recoil is on all of these reflexes and stuff. And that's, if they're just like flopping around, not really great.
Yeah, we want them to be boingy. Boingy babies are good. Maybe that'll be boingy babies are good might be our title. Yeah. So speaking of what we do in the first hour, so what to expect in the first, while we're there for 2 to 3 hours after the birth, what to expect that we'll be doing with the baby. So the first thing, what would you tell people?
Well, baby almost always goes right up to the birth parent's chest and stays there. So that's not a whole lot is happening other than we're doing skin to skin, and we are listening to the baby's lungs and heart and assessing color and tone and making sure everything is well. But all of that almost all the time can happen right there.
And you might have heard that called the APGAR score, which we did do a blog post on. We'll try to link to that blog post.
Yeah.
So those first assessments are done right there on the chest.
And then it continues that way for the first hour or so. It's not like we set a timer, but it's, around about an hour when we maybe get up to pee and maybe think about the newborn exam and cutting the cord and that kind of thing. But for that first hour, we will keep checking in with the baby and make sure everything is well.
Yeah. Sometimes people right away are like, should I put the baby to the breast? And I think it's important to know that usually babies need a little bit of time to kind of figure out that they need to eat now and where their food source is going to be. And they sometimes need a minute.
Yeah. Just think about what it must be like to be born.
Oh
and
my
just
gosh.
like, they don't have it together when they come out. Just give them a second, because they just did a big thing.
It's one of my favorite things that you say that I totally stole from you is that they have an hour to get their act together. So, they do have a little bit, give them a little bit of time to figure it out.
Yeah.
So usually around 20 minutes, the baby will kind of start pecking around. They're kind of like a little chicken. They're like looking around. Where's that nipple? They kind of start kind of instinctively and reflexively looking for something to eat. So that's when you can usually guide them to the nipple and help them get latched on.
Yes.
Some people like to do the breast crawl, and I like it in theory. I've seen the YouTube videos too, but there is a piece of it that, it's way cool, and they can do it, but it's time consuming. And I shouldn't say that we're like in a rush or anything, but it starts sometimes being hard to watch because the baby's getting frustrated.
I know.
And I don't think it's not physiologic to help the baby to the breast. I think that's totally instinctive for us.
I think the cave people would have lifted their babies up. I think it's totally okay. I know. I'm just like, sometimes I'm like, can we just help a guy out? Just help him out just a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. We don't usually assist with latch unless baby seems to be getting frustrated or mom seems to be getting frustrated. So we're just watching the situation, but especially if it's not your first baby, you'll just usually kind of go right back to, you've been there before, you know what to do. And we just let that happen as much as possible. So in the first 3 days, I want to talk about the baby's nursing habits or patterns and what to expect. Because I think there's a lot of, I don't want to say confusion, but just misunderstanding about when to offer the breast and how often the baby will be feeding. So what do you tell people about the first 24 hours?
I tell them to stay skin to skin as much as possible. So, accepting getting up to go use the bathroom or shower and things like that. Skin to skin, baby should eat every 2 to 3 hours, but probably will eat a lot more often than that. and then a 1 4-hour space in a 24-hour period. What do you think? Lactation consultant Gina.
It wasn't meant to be a quiz, sorry. And then I muted myself because you could hear the clock going off. But
that's what it was.
This is the problem with Zoom. But I guess if TV casters and everybody else can do it, we can have our little disruptions too.
Yeah.
I tell people that it's really normal for babies to be pretty sleepy in the first 24 hours. So we're aiming for that frequently, but it's very likely that they'll be sleepier. But after 24 hours, you need to make sure the baby is waking to feed frequently. So it's fine in the first 24 hours and it's not so great after that.
I do say that in the, shortly after birth, I do say that the baby's probably going to have a long nap.
Yeah.
But,
and that's the one time you're really allowed to let that happen until they're back to birth weight. Mm-hmm. But usually once they're back to birth weight, they won't have that long stretch again. So it might be your only long stretch of sleep for 5 or 6
years.
months. Oh, I didn't want to tell them the whole truth. Sorry.
Sorry, guys. Just forget it.
Never mind. She didn't say that. So all babies will lose some birth weight. There's also a lot of misconceptions around that. If you had a lot of IV fluids in labor, they might lose close to 10%. But in general, we don't really want them losing more than 7%. That's a physiological amount to lose. If you're more than 7 and less than 10, we're usually giving you a behavior change or something else to try. But after 10, we might need to be thinking about ways to get that weight boosted up. So, so expect a little bit of loss. That's really normal. And then after that first day, you really want to be sure that you're waking the baby to feed until they regain birth weight.
Yes.
So, and I say the same thing. I usually recommend that people wake them every 2 hours during the day and every 3 hours at night. It just kind of helps tilt the scale.
And it's a little more clear cut because if you say 2 to 3 hours, it could slip to 3 hours every
3
time.
to 4.
And that's Mm-hmm.
And it's important to explain too that the beginning of one feed to the beginning of the next feed is when we say 2 hours, it's 2 hours from the beginning of one to the beginning of the next. And because babies can take 45 or 60 minutes to feed, that's not a lot of time in between. So
true.
They can spend a lot of time at the breast.
But if you think about the fact that you are skin to skin with your baby, it's not that big of a deal to just feed them because they're right there.
Yeah. And I also usually like to say at least every 2 to 3 hours because sometimes they want to nurse every hour and that's totally fine and normal. So, or even more frequently, it's just, watch the baby, not the clock. You're not timing it. We do want to make sure that baby is, sorry, I just got distracted. I get texts on my computer and I forgot what I was going to say. That they're nursing. I usually say 10 to 12 times in 24 hours. Many books say 8 to 12 times in 24 hours. And I think 8 is only appropriate if somebody has really a big storage capacity, a lot of milk. for most people with average milk supplies, 8 times is light. It's very light. We're going to have problems a lot of the time if people are just feeding 8 times a day.
Yeah.
So I usually say at least 10 to 12 times. And then that second night, we talked about the third day being really hard postpartum for the birthing person. The second night is horrible with the baby. They are usually really fussy. They almost always want to nurse nonstop. This is when you start doubting everything. You think, I'm starving my baby. Yes. This baby obviously needs more milk than I have. But it's really, really normal. It's so normal.
It is so normal. Yes. And we have to talk people through that a lot because it's so hard, and you think your baby's starving, or even worse than that, other people are telling you that your baby's starving.
Yes.
And it's just, no, this is just how it works. They work really hard to help your milk come in, and it takes effort from everyone. So
yeah. And I think I mentioned in Your Vagina Looks Scary to Me that the more that they nurse in the first phase of lactation before your milk comes in, so to speak, the more they nurse, the more prolactin receptors you activate, and therefore the higher your milk supply will be. So when they do that thing where they're just nursing, they're actually setting up their milk supply for months to come.
It's all good.
It's so good. It's so important. So that's really normal. Let's talk about nipple pain. I think there's a lot of misconceptions about that too.
Yes. So, okay, this is what I think. You can tell me what you think after I'm done. But I think a certain amount of nipple pain is kind of to be expected. Oh no, don't kick me. At least you're in the other room.
Okay, I would like to say I have literally never kicked Nedra before.
It's true. She has never kicked me before. So this is a figurative kick, not a real kick. So I think a little bit of discomfort is to be expected, and that is only because it's new. You've got a new thing happening. All of this stuff is happening with your nipple that doesn't usually happen, and so I think, why wouldn't it be a little bit sore?
Yeah.
However, having it be so sore that it interferes with your ability to nurse, or having it be cracking and bleeding and blistering and all that stuff, not okay.
Yeah, I actually completely agree with that. I think that we've had the pendulum has swung so far on the misinformation. And so on one side, we have people are like, oh, breastfeeding's horrible. You're just going to have to get through weeks and weeks of cracked and bleeding nipples. And then it swung all the way over to breastfeeding shouldn't hurt. And that's definitely not normal. Weeks and weeks of cracked and bleeding nipples is not normal. But shouldn't hurt is not the whole story. There's definitely tenderness for most people. And I can even say I tandem nursed 2 of my children. So I was still nursing when I had my 3rd child, and it was still tender. And I think that that's because it's hormonal shifts that happen.
Oh,
so your hormones are shifting into lactogenesis 2 again. And I don't think no pain is attainable for very many
Plus
people.
You have the wild card of the infants, and their skill level.
Their skill level and their oral anatomy. There can be other things that are happening. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, you might be new to this. I mean, you might not be new to this, but the baby's always new to this. So that's absolutely true. So I do think that a little bit of tenderness is normal. And what I usually say is it tender at the beginning, and then within 30 seconds it starts to get better? That's a sign that it's normal tenderness. If it hurts throughout the feed, or you start noticing blisters or cracks, that's a sign that it's not normal. And that's when you need more intervention. And then feeding frequency, I don't know why I couldn't get that out. Frequency is another, besides just the how many times in a day. I think I wanted to mention, and this is why it's nice to have the webcam, that a brand newborn's belly is about the size of a shooter marble. So it's like that big.
Small.
Teensy. It has the volume of like 5 to 15 milliliters. So it can only hold 1 to 3 teaspoons of colostrum or milk. And so they're not supposed to be getting 1 and 2 ounces, but that also means they have to eat really frequently because they do need to keep their blood sugar up and get some energy and all of that. So that's another reason why they're nursing so frequently in the first few days, is that their tummies are little and they have to kind of acclimate to taking in larger quantities of milk.
Yep.
And then once they're about 3 days old, that's when your milk usually comes in. That's the onset of lactogenesis 2. And their bellies are about the size of a ping pong ball. So maybe like that big or so. And I think that the volume on that is, I'm kind of forgetting, not quite an ounce maybe. And then as your milk starts to transition into mature milk, by day 10, it's about the size of a Easter egg, like one of those plastic Easter eggs. So it really, there's a big change that's happening with how much food the baby can even digest or take in at a certain time. And we know that breastfed babies are less likely to be obese, and it's probably because they've been able to self-regulate their I always have a hard time with the word satiety, like satiated. When they're satiated, they get to decide, I'm done eating now. And they don't have anybody trying to top off that bottle, which I know I'm like, that's
right.
That's
trying to
like
get 4 ounces in this poor child.
Tiny little baby.
Yes.
Yeah. And it's just, there's no research that says that tanking them up will make them sleep better or anything like that. It's just, it's
it makes
physiological.
them spit up and it's uncomfortable and no.
Yeah. And I would also put out the idea that the end goal is not having them sleep longer stretches, because there's protective mechanisms to waking and feeding frequently. It's protective against SIDS, for example. So longer sleep of a newborn is not a goal. And usually when babies, newborns are sleeping for long periods of time, there's a problem. They're not eating enough.
Right. Yeah. So if they don't eat enough, they get sleepy, and then they don't wake up to eat, and then they don't get enough to eat, and then they're sleepy, and
vicious cycle.
And then they're jaundice.
Right. And the less they eat, the less they're moving through, moving food through their bowels, and the less meconium they're passing, and they're more likely to have high levels of jaundice, which is, a situation that requires some intervention. So but a little bit of jaundice is normal. And I have been surprised by some babies recently, actually, where I saw this baby and I thought, we need to check that bilirubin level, and it was fine. So
I know,
sometimes they just look,
fine.
And that's a reminder that it's a visual assessment is not an accurate measure of jaundice levels. So, Anything else you would want to say about the first 3 days?
I think the thing that popped into my mind earlier was the peely hands and feet. People sometimes are worried about that, and it's just a thing. They're just transitioning from their water environment into the air, and it makes them peely, and sometimes they even get like a little bit cracking in the folds and stuff. So I just tell people that if it's bothering them, they can put some coconut oil on it or something, but they don't actually have to do anything.
Sometimes their creases, like their armpits, they get really red because I think maybe there was moisture, and it can get really raw. I would recommend kind of wiping that dry and maybe putting
keeping it dry. Yes, that's a good idea too. Some cream to, if it's looking like it might, be an injury situation. What else? Newborn acne. Is a thing.
And erythema.
Toxicum.
Neonatal. It's the scariest sounding thing, but it's just a normal newborn rash. It's usually all over their trunk and face and back. And
I've seen some that were super scary looking, even though I see it all the time. But I have had a couple that I've had to snap a picture and send them to the pediatrician, and they're like, "Yep, that's still it."
They look like they have little pimples, so they have little white heads, and you're thinking, what did my baby get? So
but it's so normal. It can cover their whole body. It looks like little,
I actually have seen it on
bites.
Little,
like people, like they might think it's chicken pox, or like it's just so weird, but it's normal. And they can get, so these whiteheads on their noses, and you just want to leave those alone. Even though you really want to pop them, do not do it. Do not.
Don't be a picker.
No,
picker. Don't do it. I should have mentioned too, when we talked about having marks on the head or bruising or things on the head, for if there's like an assisted delivery, it's actually really normal for just a spontaneous vaginal delivery too. So.
Yeah, one of my recent births was a direct OP, and that poor child definitely had a little bruised nose, and I mean, it just happens.
Yeah.
They're hitting bones on the way out.
Yeah.
So
and they can have little swelling, like little pocket of swelling from being in the birth canal for a while. So there's just all kinds of funny things about their little selves that it can be disconcerting, but they shape up real fast, start filling out, they start gaining their birth weight back, they just start plumping up and looking super sweet soon. I mean, they're cute anyway, but
I think they're adorable. I just don't understand people who say that newborns are ugly, because I just think they're so cute.
They are cute, but they're not like porcelain doll cute. They're like their own little special.
They're not like roly-poly 4-month-olds. I mean, 4-month-olds are definitely the cutest babies.
Oh my gosh, it's my favorite.
But I love newborns. I just think they're adorable.
Yeah.
But they're more like Yoda adorable, not Gerber baby.
Gerber's owned by Nestle.
Oh no.
Do not support Gerber.
Can you bleep out that part of
No. I don't have any energy. We spent all of our energy on this.
I didn't
earlier.
Know.
It's okay.
I plead ignorance. Okay.
No Gerber. Ixnay on the Gerber.
No.
All right. Well, we'll wrap it up. Have a great week, everyone. I guess you'll see us on YouTube again, because here we are back to Zoom. And follow us on social at Metro Midwifery or www.modmidwives.com for the podcast episodes. All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a great week.
Bye.
Bye.